5 scary unsolved mysteries that are guaranteed to stay with you after this video. Hit those lights, sit back, and be afraid. Alien abduction. In April 1975, John Womack was driving on a country road at the foot of Ryan Mountain in the Tennessee Valley, North Alabama, when he saw a ball of fire about 3 feet in diameter, which dropped from the sky and landed in front of his car. The ball rolled along the gravel road until it made a sharp turn into an open meadow. At this point, John stopped his car and got out to investigate, but the craft rose up and disappeared. As John stared at the sky, dumbstruck at what he had just witnessed, he heard a low humming sound coming from the direction in which the object disappeared, and suddenly a huge silvery disc-like craft with shallow upper and lower domes appeared. The craft was about 150 feet in diameter and 50 feet high, surrounded by a yellowish-blue glow that extended for several feet in front of the disc. As John retreated in terror, a beam of red light struck him in the face. The next thing he knew, he was waking up aboard the craft, sitting in a padded chair with a metal helmet on his head. In the room, John claims there were intricately designed devices and 3 types of alien creatures. 2 leaders with noseless faces and mouths similar to that of a porpoise. 3 giants at least 8 feet tall with hairy torsos and fierce-looking faces, and 6 to 8 5-foot creatures with flipper feet, 6 crab-like arms, 2 antennae, and beards. Their bodies were covered with greenish warty lumps, and their faces displayed a grinning expression. This is the picture John drew later of what he saw. As John peered around at this bizarre scene, he noted that while the room was covered in bizarre equipment and machinery, there was no door or windows, but rather a large TV-type screen that showed a continuous stream of pictures of the area where the ship was landed. One alien leader spoke by the means of a translating machine, telling John he would not be harmed, and shook his hand. It told him that their planet was 40 light years away. Their ships were propelled by solar energy, and they ate food pellets to survive. The being also said that they had been studying Earth for thousands of years and believed humans are violent, miserable, and greedy. However, they explained that they cannot directly intervene to help humanity because it would require the use of force. John was taken on a tour of the ship and given a view of the alien solar system, and he was informed that their time on Earth was limited and that they would have to leave soon. They offered John the chance to travel with them. As John sat on the strange chair, he claims he experienced a mind-bending journey through space before waking up back on Earth, watching the craft leave. Now, we all know this all sounds a bit far-fetched, but John is adamant about what happened to him and even wrote a book about his experiences called I Was Picked Up by a UFO. Let us know your thoughts on this seemingly crazy story. The Pollock Sisters. John and Florence Pollock were a young couple who lived in Hexham, a small town in Northumberland, England. In 1957, their family consisted of 2 daughters, Joanna and Jacqueline, who were 11 and 6 years old, respectively. However, tragedy struck on May 5th of that year when the family car collided with a truck on their way back from church and both their daughters were killed instantly. Their parents who survived the crash were understandably shattered and devastated. Soon after the tragedy, Florence found herself pregnant again, and in October 1958, the couple welcomed twin girls Gillian and Jennifer. The arrival of the girls brought some joy back into their lives. But not long after their birth, they began to notice strange things about the twins. They had unusual behaviors that mirrored their deceased sisters. They played with the same toys, and as they got older, Gillian, the slightly older twin, would talk about things that only her dead sister Joanna would have known. She would also point out landmarks and places that her sister used to frequent, despite having never been there herself. The older the twins got, the more vocal they were about their memories of their sisters, and would often refer to things that they had never been told about, such as events that happened before they were born, and even knew the names of the dolls their sisters played with. Their parents were understandably alarmed by their daughter's strange behavior and sought help from the medical community, but none of them could explain what was happening. In fact, some of the doctors dismissed the parents' concerns and suggested that the girls were simply making things up. Despite the skepticism, the Pollocks were convinced that their daughters were telling the truth. The case attracted the attention of many researchers who were fascinated by the story of the twins' alleged reincarnation, and pioneering researcher Ian Stevenson invested the case. Stevenson met the twins and their family, interviewing them extensively. In his report, he noted that the twins had an irrational fear of cars, despite never being in a car accident. He also observed that the twins exhibited behaviors typical of their deceased sisters, such as preferring the same foods and clothes. After the twins turned 5, these incidents became less frequent, and the girls went on to lead normal lives. The Pollock twins and the suggestion that they were reincarnated as their dead sisters has been met with skepticism, and some have argued that the twins' behavior can be explained by a psychological phenomenon known as cryptomnesia, which occurs when a person unconsciously retrieves a forgotten memory and believes it to be a new experience. Others believe the whole thing is a hoax and that the parents were involved in perpetrating the deception. However, the Pollock family denied this and truly believed that their deceased sisters had been reincarnated. Regardless of the skepticism surrounding the case, the story of the Pollock twins remains one of the most intriguing examples of alleged reincarnation and has fascinated people worldwide for decades, and despite the doubters, the story continues to capture the public's imagination. What really happened to Walter Collins? In 2008, Clint Eastwood's film reawakened interest in one of the most bizarre and tragic crime stories of the 1920s. On March 10, 1928, Walter Collins' mother, Christine, gave her son some money to go to the cinema. But when he failed to return home after the movie, Christine reported him missing. His disappearance garnered widespread attention, and the Los Angeles Police Department pursued numerous leads, but without any success, and they faced increasing public pressure to solve the case. 5 months after the boy disappeared, a boy claiming to be Walter was discovered in DeKalb, Illinois. Letters and photographs were exchanged before Christine Collins paid for the boy to be brought to Los Angeles. During the reunion, arranged by the police, Christine repeatedly stated that the boy was not her son, but instead of believing her, the officer in charge of the case, Captain J.J. Jones, accused Christine of being a bad mother and bringing ridicule to the police. Under extreme pressure, Jones convinced Christine to take the boy home and try him out. She tried the boy out, but returned 3 weeks later, and once again confirmed that he was not her son. Following this, Jones had Collins committed to the psychiatric ward at Los Angeles County Hospital using a Code 12 internment. This term was specifically used to incarcerate or commit someone who was deemed difficult or an inconvenience. However, under questioning, the boy admitted to being 12-year-old Arthur Hutchins Jr., a runaway from Iowa. His motive for posing as Collins was to get to Hollywood so he could meet his favorite actor, Tom Mix. After the boy's confession, Christine was released and later filed a lawsuit against the Los Angeles Police Department and was awarded $10,800, which Jones was ordered to pay. However, she never received a penny. In 1929, Gordon Stewart Northcott was found guilty of abducting, molesting, and killing 3 young boys in what became known as the Wineville Chicken Coop murders. His mother Sarah confessed in late 1928 that she helped her son kill Walter Collins. Sarah was later sentenced without trial to life imprisonment for her alleged role in Walter's death. However, oddly, they never prosecuted Gordon Northcott, although he was found guilty for the other murders and sentenced to death. Northcott always denied killing Walter Collins, and his mother later rescinded her confession. Christine always believed her son was still alive and never stopped looking for him. She died never knowing the truth on December 8, 1964, at the age of 75. What happened to Sarah Ware? In 1898, Maine had fewer than 1 million inhabitants, and everyone in the surrounding towns knew each other and their business. So when 59-year-old Sarah Ware went missing, it became the topic of conversation among everyone in the waterfront town of Bucksport. Sarah was last seen after buying a cigarillo at a local store just before it closed. She was well known in the town, working as a housekeeper for some of the wealthier locals. She was a hard worker and a single mother. At the time of her vanishing, she had been living with Mrs. Miles, an elderly lady that she took care of in between her other jobs. For 2 weeks, search parties scoured the countryside with no success, and the strange disappearance was front-page news of papers from Portland to Boston. Eventually, the smell of death directed searchers to Sarah's body, less than a mile away from where she lived, near a path she had used for years. She was found with a raincoat underneath her nearly severed head. Initially, searchers were unsure if it was her, because her face had been eaten away by wild animals. Close to her body was her purse and a knife. The grisly state of her corpse indicated she had been brutally murdered, a rare crime in the tight-knit community of Bucksport. Sarah's corpse was carefully placed in a wagon to be transported back to town. However, her injuries were so horrific that the bumpy ride back caused her head to detach from her body. An examination of her head revealed a blunt force wound that penetrated her cranium. Similar to the disappearance, the murder became front-page news and was the talk of the town for days and weeks to come. At the time, detectives were in short supply and had to be drafted in from miles away and paid for. When they finally arrived, they visited Mrs. Miles and she informed them that Sarah kept her earnings in a trunk in her bedroom. But when it was searched, there was not a penny to be found. However, after another search a few days later, the money that had been missing had mysteriously found its way back in her trunk. The last person to see Sarah alive was William Trewargy, a mean man who Sarah cleaned for. A search of his property revealed a bloody tarp in the back of his wagon, along with a hammer that seemed to match the round hole in Sarah's skull. Trewargy denied any knowledge of the crime, although it was local knowledge that he owed Sarah money. It wasn't until the following spring that a man named Joe Fogg Jr. confessed to accepting payment from Trewargy in return for disposing of Sarah's body. So now detectives had a motive, a murder weapon, and a witness. However, it was a further 3 years before William Trewargy was accused of murdering Sarah. However, during the passage of time, strange things started to happen. Things that seemed to be more than mere coincidences. Many of the people involved in the original investigation had died, including the coroner who determined Sarah's cause of death. Joseph Fogg, the main witness, retracted his testimony, claiming he had been forced into the confession. Mysteriously, the tarp and hammer found in Trewargy's wagon had disappeared, and the only piece of evidence left, apart from the bloody knife that was found next to Sarah's body, was her skull, that had been kept inside a sealed box in the Ellsworth court. With so little evidence, there was no case against Trewargy, and the case was dismissed. As for Sarah's skull, well, it sat locked in a box for 100 years. Her headless body had been buried in a pauper's grave, with no grave marker, and it is unknown whether her body was dug up when the graveyard was repurposed as the man-made Silver Lake. It's possible that it now lies beneath the water. Eventually, Sarah's skull was buried in Oak Hill Cemetery in Bucksport, in her ex-husband's family plot. To this day, the murder of Sarah Ware haunts the state of Maine, and the case is still active. However, it is unlikely it will ever be solved. Some believe the spirit of Sarah Ware is restless, and she can be seen on moonlit nights walking along the shores of Silver Lake, simply searching for closure, justice, and her head.